Now, it is my great pleasure to introduce Natasha Myers, who is here as part of our ongoing Feminism in the Senses lecture series. This series is exploring how public ideas about sensitivity vary in relation to gender, sexuality, and race. Women, for example, who speak out against injustices are often called too sensitive, but stock traders are not held to account for enthusiasms that threaten financial stability. I have more on this idea about what counts as adequate sense data, but I thought I'd actually read from Natasha Myers' amazing book, Rendering Life Molecular: Models, Modelers, and Excitable Matter, copies of which I believe are, yes, are...
there are order forms at the back.
There are order forms for them on the back table, but I thought I would read to you how Natasha talks about sensorium in her book's introduction. She first quotes art historian Carolyn Jones, that the sensorium is, for her, at any historical moment, shifting, contingent, dynamic, and alive. And then Natasha qualifies that the senses, as she explores them, are not innate biological functions that can be divided up into the 5 familiar modalities of sight, touch, taste, hearing, and smell. Sensing bodies are not separate from the worlds they reach toward and acts as sense-making. Sensing takes shape between bodies and worlds. Moreover, broad social, cultural, and economic forces condition both the contours of a person's sensorium and what Jacqueline Rancière identifies as distribution of the sensible. Such distributions are the effects of sensory regimes, themselves shaped by processes such as capitalism, colonialism, and biopower. These regimes of the sensible powerfully shape what we can and cannot see, say, feel, or know, and often remain so self-evident that they are as imperceptible as the air we breathe. This book focuses on the distribution of the sensible and the making of expert sensoria in the context of protein modelers' efforts to make sense of life at the molecular level. I thought that was so beautifully done, and then she goes into Bruno Latour on for years. But in any case, you can see what gorgeous research questions and thinking Natasha Myers is bringing to us in her book, and as I'm sure she will today in her talk as well. In her talk today, Natasha Myers will show us what an attentiveness to sense data can contribute to our understanding of conservation and the environment. Her queer, feminist, ecological approach reveals how sense data is shared among species and suggests that we tune into the effective ecologies that exist around us. Natasha Myers is an associate professor in the Department of Anthropology at York University, the convener of the Politics of Evidence Working Group, director of the Plant Studies Collaboratory, a member of Sensorium, and she's on the editorial board of Catalyst. She works alongside Michelle Murphy as co-organizer of Toronto's Technoscience Salon and is co-founder of the Right to Know Project. Her ethnographic research examines forms of life in contemporary arts, sciences, and ecologies. Her book, Rendering Life Molecular: Models, Modelers, and Excitable Matter, Duke University Press, 2015, is an ethnography of an interdisciplinary group of scientists who make living substance come to matter at the molecular scale. In her new work, which she draws on in her talk today, she's experimenting with ways to document the effective ecologies that take shape between plants and people, and among plants and their remarkably multi-species affinities. Please join me in welcoming Natasha Myers.
Thank you so much, Rachel. It is such an honor to be here and to visit such a wonderful place full of such incredible botanical bounty. I've been in awe all weekend. This talk is where I'm going to start off somewhat unconventionally with a little manifesto that offers my take on what I'd like to see take root in the wake of Anthropocene thinking. And this will help me set the stage for the larger project that I'll spend the rest of this talk describing. And I'll close by offering you a glimpse of the first sounds and images emerging from a research creation collaboration that I've been developing over the past year. So several parts to this talk, all intimately related, but there might be some big jumps also conceptually. So, recently I've been introducing myself as an anthropologist of plants, but secretly I've started calling myself a planthropologist. I spend my time documenting the remarkable relationships that take shape among plants and people people in such diverse sites as plant science laboratories, artist studios, performance art events, botanical gardens, and ecological restoration studies. I'm an active participant in what could be called a recent turn to plants in the arts, sciences, philosophy, and in anthropology. I've been watching closely as plants are getting swept up with the fungi, microbes, and other critters as attention swerved to more than human-animal relations, with increasing intensity and force. What has been fomenting this despeciated orchid fever? What I've been confronting again and again on my travels around the world, meeting with artists, scientists, gardeners, landscape architects, conservation ecologists, and others, is that people feel that now is the time to rethink our relationships with plants. Plant practitioners are coming to terms with the profound inter-implication of plants and people in a time of unprecedented ecological destruction. They are reeling under the weight of the realization that we are not alone, that plants are a force and power to be reckoned with, and that plants, and that human futures hinge on the future of plant lives and worlds. I'll bring us to an animation that I thought might offer us.
I'm a climate scientist at NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center. What your?
We're not going to hear much from him, but we are going to look at this incredible animation that was generated by NASA. And models are, of course, models of models of models all the way down, and even still, NASA's time-based simulation of the global carbon cycle, visualized over the duration of 1 year, offers one way that we might begin to render the force and power of plants. In this rendering, carbon dioxide, coded red for emergency, can be seen to accumulate with alarming intensity. Pay close attention, however, to what happens month by month as the seasons change and northern forests begin to photosynthesize in the summer. We need to learn to read this simulation not for data to feed an economizing logic that sees plants and trees performing ecosystem services, but as a document to remind us that we are not alone. The practitioners I've been working with are grappling with ways that plants have made this planet livable and breathable for animals like us. Indeed, plants are sun worshippers and worldly conjurers, lapping up sunlight, inhaling carbon dioxide, drinking in water, and releasing oxygen. They compose the very atmosphere we breathe. Pulling matter out of thin air, they teach us the most nuanced lessons about mattering. We thrive on plants' wily aptitude for chemical synthesis. All cultures turn around plants' metabolic rhythms. Plants make the energy-dense sugars that fuel and nourish us, the potent substances that heal, dope, and adorn us, and the resilient fibers that clothe and shelter us. Plants are the substance, substrate, scaffolding, symbol, sign, and sustenance of the economies the world over. And so it is not an overstatement to say that we are only because they are. Many are making the claim that we are in the throes of the Anthropocene, that newly named geological era that seeks to credit man's hubris, audacity, and greed with the power to terraform the planet, rework the composition of the atmosphere, and disrupt climate patterns. Whether one places the golden spike 14,000 years ago with the invention of agriculture, 500 years ago with the onslaught of colonialism, plantation agriculture, and forms of accumulation by dispossession, or with the inception of capitalism and the Industrial Revolution, all of these moments mark profound shifts in the ways that people relate to plants. However, one spins at the Anthropocene, though, remains grounded in the extractive logics of colonialism and capitalism and on the presumption of humanity's perceived power over nature. If Frederick Jameson is right that we live in a time when it is easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism, and if Donna Haraway attests the Anthropocene foments the allure of, quote, man's tragic detumescence, a posture that leans so precariously toward inevitable apocalypse, then and promises ruin and devastation, then perhaps it is time to get ourselves out of the Anthropocene. This is no place to linger. What ways of thinking, making, and doing might take root in its wake? The episteme that I want to thrive in the ruins of Anthropocene thinking is what I cheaply but also quite seriously want to call the philanthropy. I imagine it as an aspirational esteem and a way of doing life in which people assert their radical solidarity with plants. The Planthropocene begins from the premise that we are of the plants. As an esteem rather than a time-bounded epoch, this shift need not be deferred to some distant future after apocalypse or ruination. This is a shift already happening in our midst here and now. I love this image of Viennese artist Rosa Weinberger watering the weeds of Brandenburger Tor in post-war Berlin as an image of the kinds of gardening that we might imagine for the Planthropocene. Like the subterranean forces of roots that can rupture through concrete, new practices and techniques can create fissures in the most hegemonic formation. The Planthropocene must be marked by a profound commitment to collaboration. It is a call to change the terms for counter, to make allies with these green beings. But to do this, we must abandon the notion that we are in control. Rather, we must get to know plants intimately and on their terms. We must learn to listen to their demands for unpaved land and for a time outside the rhythms of capitalist extraction. We need to tap into their desire for forms of life that are not entirely for us. And we need to involve ourselves intimately with these plants in an effort to reconstitute a planet fit for what Anna Singh calls collaborative survival. And so in my new work, some of which I'll share with you today, I'm looking out for sites where people are finding new ways to cultivate relationships with plants. Sites where plants and people are both in the making. In these sites, I'm asking what forms of life might we cultivate to ally ourselves with the plants. My aim is to amplify practices that remain unseen, what Mary Soul de la Cadena might call the anthropos not seen, those ways of doing life that have been rendered illegible and invisible by colonizing economic forces. To do this, I've been cultivating modes of attention that can document the affected ecologies taking shape between plants and people, and among plants and their multi-species affines. In the process, I'm learning alongside other practitioners how to vegetalize our all-too-human sensorium, to tune in to plant lives and worlds. My new field sites include the ancient remnants of black oak savannas that still thrive in a park in downtown Toronto where I live. It is there that I'm developing an ethnography of the arts and sciences of this urban ecology, and where I've launched a research creation project working with an award-winning dancer, choreographer, and filmmaker, Ayelen Verona. Through our multisensory explorations, we are learning how to do ecology otherwise. We are cultivating modes of attention so we can learn to pay attention to this lively space that is both in the making and coming undone. So let me take you to the Oak Savannah. To begin, I want to take you to my favorite place in my park. Let's start here, just past this stone and metal gate that marks the entrance to the park along Parkside Drive. The crisscrossing arches of this growing gateway make an inviting pathway for recruitable wanderers, those who are not compelled, willingly, unwittingly, or forced to follow the paved road. This 400-acre park circuitous roadways carry a steady stream of cars, racing bikes and joggers, dog walkers and stroller pushers, people with mobility devices seeking hard, flat, and sure surfaces. The woodland paths I stick to are accessible only to some, though one elderly woman definitely makes use of her walker to navigate the twisty, root-bound, eroded paths of the ravine down by Spring Creek. All sorts find themselves on these unofficial trails. Throngs of people living in and around the city visit the park daily and in all seasons. In addition to the joggers, woodland wanderers, and dog walkers, kids drag their parents to adventure playgrounds and to the zoo. There are picnic grounds, baseball diamonds, soccer fields, a hockey rink, a swimming pool, allotment gardens, a nature center, and a children's garden. And visitors can also tour the park on a train. In spite of a recent ban on fishing, fishermen still gather by the sides of the Grenadier Pond. Lovers lay in blankets in the tall grasses. Gay men cruise the ravines. Graduate students and postdocs study the bats and other wildlife. Birders and photographers gather silently by the bird feeders through the winter. And in the summer, the bellowing voices of actors reciting lines from Shakespeare can be heard throughout the park. Marathoners and cyclists come here to race. Hordes of cherry blossom enthusiasts clamber around the blooming trees in May. This year, however, the cherry blossoms didn't bloom. sparking speculations about climate change and conversations about the precarity of life on a damaged planet. I like to think, though, that the trees just refused to perform this year to protest the man-made crowds. Hyde Park is flanked by major thoroughfares on all three sides, or on three of its four sides. This is a city heaving with life, caught interminably in gridlock. And maybe it's all the noise and concrete and bustle of this city that propels me into this woodland. Though this is no quiet place cordoned off from the city, it promises another kind of rush and rhythm. The sounds of cars and trucks and planes are never fully muted. They just propagate differently here. There is no boundary separating city life from urban life, from the city park, from the urban life, realms that people still call nature. Muffled and modulated by trees and shrubs, birds and squirrels and insects, ravines and slopes, city sounds resonate here in what Deleuze and Guattari might call a distinct vibratory milieu. The park generates its own noises too. There are the barking dogs, of course, and then there are the dog people who sometimes bark louder and more insistently at their dogs, calling out in voices alternately angry, insistent, or forlorn, a name or command over and over again. Then there are the chipmunks with their shrill warning calls that come always with a shiver of movement, a rustle in the leaf litter, and the cicadas in the summer sounding like electricity running along the wires. There are the over 200 species of migratory birds whose distinctive calls sound out to space. There's a sandy hillside here where the grasshoppers and dragonflies and wasps in a high summer make such a din they drown out the drone planes above. And if you slow down recording the sounds in this space, you could almost hear bird calls ricochet off the trees, making it seem as if echolocation is not the sole providence of the big brown bats that deftly navigate this space at dusk. One of my favorite spots here, just past the gate, is here, an image. In summer it fills in with leaves and green and becomes a secret grove bounded on either side by mounds heaving with life and rock. It's a tangled bank of lurching and falling trees covered in frilled fungi and neon green mosses, a thickening underbrush of European buckthorn, black cherry, and young oaks, tick trefoil and milkweed, and the searching tips of growing grapevines. A flattened cardboard box was perhaps someone's bed one night. There's an old sweatshirt bundled up and decomposing under that log, a pair of men's shoes, one here, one there, pungent wafts of marijuana smoke billowed from here some sunny afternoons. Sometimes it's the neighborhood kids, sometimes I'm sure it's their parents. In the winter, the thickening foliage dies back, stalks wither, blacken, and collapse. Those seeking refuge lose their cover, and you can see clear to the roadside and into the homes across the street. This little section of the park, bounded by Parkside Drive to the east and a deep ravine to the west, spans no more than 2 acres. But I never used to come here. Maybe I could sense that it was already inhabited by others, wanderers, wayfarers, and gallivanter, their beer bottles, cigarette butts, used condoms, and trash scattered here and there. This was a blank space on my internal map of the park, which I claim to know like the back of my hand. From a safe distance, it seemed crumbling, derelict. Massive limbs of fallen trees are scattered here like bodies left unburied in a graveyard. It used to feel too exposed here, not only to the road, its running engines, and that unending expanse of city to the east, but also to the sky. The trees are tall here, the spaces between them are wide. This stretch of land here, though, doesn't let you forget for a moment that you're in a city, and maybe that's why I'm so drawn to this place now. I still haven't gotten over the fact that a place like this can and does exist, right here, even at the cusp of such dense urbanization, that a place like this is still unpaved, still turning life into death and death into life. Indeed, death has been cusping life here for thousands of years, and life has been cusping death. The trees that fell here 100 years ago are still falling. This is a very special place. It is a remnant of an ancient black oak savanna, a happening over 10,000 years in the making. How do I know this? If you come up here onto this higher ground, you can see the land's smooth, undulating topography. Look at the sloping mounds and gullies. Trace those remarkably fluid curves and troughs. If you kick your boot into the dirt here, you can see that this is all sand. These are sand dunes from the bed of an ancient lake. 10,000 years ago, all of this was underwater. Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, Lake Huron, Lake Superior, Lake Michigan, the St. Lawrence River. The familiar contours of these lakes and rivers that we know today have changed dramatically over time. They used to be much bigger, and at times they were much smaller. Wide swaths of sandy land now lie between the oldest shores and the newer shores. This is what John Riley, a historian of the deep time of this region, calls a quote shifting, drowned in a landscape of quote shifting, drowned and emerging shores, worked and reworked by water and wind. Unquote. Lakes rose and fell while lands rebounded, released from the lake of retreating glaciers. But this landscape was not just sculpted by glaciers, wind, water, animals, and plants. An oak savanna is always in transition, always on its way to becoming forest. It needs fire to thrive. This land was shaped by Aboriginal people who used fire to keep the savanna open for hunting, farming, and building homes. The Huron lived here, the Wendat, the Petun, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit River. For millennia, these people lit fires to keep the grasslands open. The 250-year-old trees that are thriving and dying here today remember that time. They remember a time before colonization. They remember the fire. They remember their people. An oak savanna is, in this sense, a natural cultural formation par excellence. You can't take the people out of the savanna. Well, you can, but it will cease to be an oak savanna. By the early 1800s, this land was fully settled by Europeans. They put sheep out on the grassy meadows, which appeared to be so perfectly prepared for them. The sheep seemed at first to do just as good a job as the fire for keeping the forest canopy open, but they ate everything, including the young oak seedlings. The old oaks kept growing, but no new oaks grew alongside them. This was not a problem for farmers, but it propelled the landscape into new directions over time. Thick turf grasses suppressed wildflowers who cleverly secreted their seeds deep in the seedbed, waiting and waiting for the fires to come. This oak savanna now has new people. In the late 1990s, a group of concerned citizens, ecologists, and field naturalists began to organize around a 1989 report by the Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources that identified High Park woodlands as an area of natural and scientific interest. By the year 2000, ecological restoration efforts were in full swing. The savanna's new people carry with them a love of nature, a desire for retreat from urban sprawl, the tenets of best practices for ecological restoration, ideas about what constitutes a healthy and unhealthy ecosystem, and visions for what this space should be. The city's urban forestry team responsible for maintaining these lands calculate resource expenditures, ecosystem services, and energy budgets. They set up monitoring floods and archives to report annual changes. They tally lists of species at risk and rare and native plants, and administer herbicides to keep the most tenacious invasives in check. They post signs to tell people how and where and when to walk, and when and where to leash their dogs. A large team of eager volunteers meets monthly, donning thick gloves to rip out with relish invasive species like garlic mustard, hedge parsley, dog strangling vine, oriental bittersweet, and European buckthorn. They cultivate big bluestem, little bluestem, Indian grass, Pennsylvania sedge, hoary vervain, gray goldenrod, heath aster, and wild blue lupin in their greenhouses from seeds gathered annually from the rehabilitated grasslands. Administering controlled burns, carefully planned schedule, the urban forestry staff have brought back the fires to awaken the seed bank, to burn through the turf grass grown thick from decades of mowing. A wild garden thrives here in High Park's remnant oak savanna, proving anew that you cannot take people out of the savanna without changing it forever. And yet, amidst all of this love, care, and attention, it is clear that the savanna is coming undone. The oaks have been coming down fast. 5 have fallen since I started coming here daily last year. The next generation, which have grown up in thickets on sites that have been more burned according to urban forestry protocol, are barely 15 years old. In spite of all these well-meaning efforts, there is no bringing back the oak savanna. This place is becoming other. How can we learn to pay attention to this remarkable 10,000-year-old happening, which is both in the making and coming undone? This site forces us to grapple with an ecology that cannot thrive without people. It demands new modes of attention to help its people pay attention to life on the scale of natural cultural happenings. How can we tune into this ancient ecology situated in the middle of a vibrant city? The question for me really is, what is this land becoming? And how are its people also in the making alongside it? This place is teaching us important lessons about plant-people relations in a time of unprecedented ecological transformation. And my sense is that it holds promise for inspiring an ecology that does not reproduce notions of natural purity, moralizing distant forces of proper relations, reproductive imperatives, productive as tropes, or fantasies of nature requiring removal of people. It can teach us about the limits of economizing, militarized, heteronormative logics that ground conventional ecology. And it offers crucial sites for clues for decolonizing ecological knowledge. This site might teach us how to tell stories of the past, present, and future of this landscape in a way that keeps a range of knowledges alive and dancing with one another. And it may offer opportunities to learn alongside Aboriginal peoples for whom this is and always has been a sacred site. So, scientists in a wide range of fields are quickly coming to terms with the remarkable sensory dexterities of plants. Plants, they are learning, have the capacity to articulate themselves through volatile chemical utterances and communicate with one another and with fungi, microbes, insects, and animals, even at great distances. Chemical ecologists who study signals that organisms use to communicate with one another are learning that plants have the capacity to respond actively to environmental change and even to catalyze ecological relations. The stories they tell, however, tend to render plants life through neo-Darwinian narratives that have become hegemonic in conventional ecology. The ways that conventional ecology tells stories about past and future is bound to an evolutionary logic that inscribes the temporal arc of evolutionary change with the strategizing telos of species, struggle, and survival. In the broad field of evolutionary ecology, which undergirds ways of thinking and practices in conservation ecology and ecological restoration, efficiency and reproductive success trump all other stories. Heteronormative reproductive imperatives are grafted onto an energetic economy that insists that the propagation of genomes is the only marker of evolutionary success. Plant ecologies are rendered in the form of militarized economies. Plant communication is modeled on cybernetic information flow. Plants apparently have defense budgets. They recruit bodyguards, and they conduct cost-benefit analyses of energy expenditures and resource use. Yet I hope that it is possible to do ecology otherwise. And my work in the Oak Savannah aims to cultivate a queer, feminist political ecology that can keep pace with the ephemeral rhythms, temporalities, and improvisations of more than human creatures. Working athwart reductive, mechanistic, adaptationist logics that ground ecological sciences, I'm pretty sure that it is possible to tell stories about the creative, improvisational, and fleeting practices through which plants and other creatures involve themselves in one another's lives. And in my work with feminist historian Carla Hustad, we propose the concept of involutionary momentum to help us tell stories about the affective push and pull among bodies, including the affinities, ruptures, enmeshments, and repulsions among organisms constantly inventing new ways to live with and alongside one another. In our study of Darwin's pollination experiments and present-day chemical ecologists, we asked, what if the topology of plant relations were conditioned not by a calculating economy that aims to maximize fitness, but also by an affected ecology shaped by pleasure, play, and experimental proposition, where evolutionists tend to fetishize economic logics, random mutations driving generational change, and functionalist accounts of adaptation. We sought out the involutionists, who told stories about the fleeting improvisational and contingent forms of life happening now and now and now. Involutionary stories unsettle notions of the natural fixity of species boundaries and the normative counts of sexual reproduction and sensuality. They begin from the premise that plants and other creatures are up to stuff, that they are responsive, sensing bodies that are always already sentient, that they already have a kind of agency and a kind of intentionality. In an involutionary view, plants become alchemists who turn sunlight into carbon dioxide, into volatile utterance and innovative forms of atmospheric media amenable for long-distance expression. They are artisans who craft mimetically responsive anatomies. They are also keenly attuned sensors whose bodies can register the subtlest differences in temperature, the slightest brush of the wing of a passing insect. Their roots and rhizomes form a network of connections as complex as an animal's nervous system, and they move actively in response to their ever-changing world. Getting to know plants in this way requires tuning in and sensitizing one's sensorium to the marvelous ways that plants do life. To become with and alongside plants, it is necessary to vegetalize one's all-human sensorium. So it is through an attention to this kind of involutionary momentum and effective ecologies that it might be possible to trace the oak savannah's compositions and decompositions, its rhythms and tempos and ephemeral. And so to conclude this talk, I want to share with you some of the first images and sounds emerging from my research creation collaboration with Island and Verona. Working at the cusp of art, anthropology, and ecology, this research creation project cultivates a kind of ungrid-able ecology that reimagines the techniques and practices of ecology beyond the normative, moralizing, and economizing discourses that ground conventional approaches. Taking as a provocation the monitoring plot signs that are scattered throughout rehabilitated areas of the savanna, we're asking, what is environmental monitoring? How can we interrogate the self-evidence of approaches to conservation ecology and environmental monitoring by throwing open the very question of what it means to pay attention to all these beings who have been paying attention for so many millennia? What modes of attention can attend to what this space cares about? How might this space teach us about mattering and what really matters to it? So over the past year, I've been working on this project called Becoming Sensor in an Oak Savannah, and working with Island and Verona, experimenting with sensory practices that can document the growth, decay, combustion, and decomposition that contour life in this remarkable land. And these are images of Island and Verona, as we're developing sort of photographic technique, imaging techniques that in a sense are kinesthetic attunements to the space. We see this as a kind of ungrid-able ecology that reconfigures the naturalist notebook by innovating techniques for tuning into the effectively charged spaces of encounter and the momentum that propels plants, insects, animals, and people to involve themselves in this ongoing cultural happening. So here, Island is using movement as a way to record sounds in the landscape. And so we're thinking about modes of kinesthetic imaging alongside modes of kinesthetic listening in ways that actually can help us transform this kind of sonic ecology of the place and get at some of the richer and deeper textures of the space. And so what I'd like to do is share with you a glimpse of some of the first images that are emerging from our collaboration. Here are some of them here. What I'd like to do is actually show you a film with the soundscape that we generated. And so we can tune into this. And I'd love to be able, after the film, be able to take questions about what you're seeing and hearing and the effects of this. Okay, so I'm going to actually close this here. It might be helpful to close some of the other ones involved in order to get it.
Oh, sorry.
otherwise. The idea was that not to document, you know, the traditional nature photography is like documenting objects. We're really interested in documenting the encounter. And so Island is actually dancing with the camera in her relationship as she's moving with the phenomena that she's pulling into view. And so there's this dancerly moment, and then also the attempt in the soundscape to speed up and slow down the sound was to access both through her actual moving of the body, but also in the recording itself, that she slow down, but to sort of get at the elasticity of time, so the deep time of this space, so that a stomping foot actually begins to sound like some of the larger scale geological forces that were happening in the deep time, and so the qualities that you were able to access, where the calls of birds actually began to sound like, you know, the cries of a coyote rather than just the bird. And so hearing the multiple tones and registers of all the voices that are both present and also remembered in the past. And so we sort of showed this work for the first time at an art event in April in Toronto. It was this really great opportunity for us to sort of generate work. So this is just the very first part of the work that we've done. But we hope that this is the kind of practice that might root ourselves into what we're imagining as the